Welcome back, everyone, to Living Free, Being Me, the official podcast. Today, we have a really, really popular topic that we're going to talk about because I know that you can relate to this. And what we're talking about today is people pleasing. Are you a people pleaser? Do you put everyone else's needs and desires ahead of your own? Do you put everything else ahead of yourself? And if you do, or if you know somebody that does this and you're looking to figure out why and to figure out how to make that change, this is the episode for you. So, in today's episode, when we're talking about people pleasing, we're going to talk about how people pleasers act. Like, what are the signs of being a people pleaser? So you can figure out if you fall into this category or if you know anyone that falls into this category. And we're going to talk about, of course, how it feels to be a people pleaser because our feelings are driven by our emotions and our emotions are super, super important. So it's really essential to understand what it feels like to be a people pleaser. We're also going to talk about why we actually do this, why we put everybody and everything else ahead of ourselves, because there are driving causes for that. There are real reasons that we have these behaviors and that we have these tendencies. And we're going to talk about the risks of being a people pleaser because we may think that it's the best thing in the world to do to make everybody else happy, but there's risks associated with putting everything and everyone else ahead of ourselves. And then, of course, the most important part of it all is how do we stop? How do we stop putting everyone else and everything else ahead of ourselves? Because we want to know how we can break those cycles, how we can make those changes in our lives so that we can actually choose ourselves. We can put ourselves first and live that authentic life that we really, really, really want to live. So we're going to dive in and we're going to figure out, like, are you a people pleaser? And if you are, it's okay. I have been one and I am still breaking those chains. And I am going to share with you everything that I have learned about people pleasing and really how to start making those changes so that you can choose yourself and put yourself first. Because when you do that, everything in your life changes. And then you really start to feel good and you really start to enjoy your life and you have your purpose again and you don't feel so alone. Because even if you're a people pleaser, I can guarantee that you're doing it for everybody else, but at the same time, you feel so alone. And that's the worst feeling in the world. I know exactly how that feels, and I don't want you to feel like that anymore. I want you to feel worthy and deserving because you are. So let's get right into it. Let's figure out what it is that people pleasers do. Like, what are those signs so that we can figure out if you fall into this or if you know anybody that falls into this category. Okay, so people that people please have a really low self-esteem. They don't believe in their worth. They don't believe that they deserve to be a priority. They believe that they just don't have what it takes to be that important person in their own life. And so if you have low self-esteem, it's very, very much likely that you're a people pleaser. And it's okay. Remember, we're not beating ourselves up. We're just simply right now going through the different signs of being a people pleaser. So you can see which ones hit home for you. So you can figure out maybe why it is that you're actually people pleasing. Because when we figure out the root cause of something, then we know that there's a solution. There's an answer. We just have to figure out what it is that driving reason so that we can then make those changes and make those shifts. And if you have low self-esteem, you probably also have a really hard time, like, being yourself, being authentically you, living life on your terms, expressing yourself fully. We struggle with the fact of wanting to do that because we don't want disapproval of others. We don't want to be judged by others. And then that leads us to people pleasing, because if we don't feel like we can authentically be ourselves and live our lives without being judged or without being ridiculed, then we're going to act a different way in order to make other people comfortable. And that's people pleasing. Now, you may also notice that a lot of people pleasers are always giving. And if you feel like you're the giver in all of your relationships, you're probably people pleasing in those relationships. You're always giving your time, you're always giving your energy and your resources to other people, but you're not doing that for yourself. And that can feel very, very frustrating because you know that you deserve that within your soul, but your mind is getting in the way. and it's telling you that in order to receive, you have to give. And while I believe that what you give is what you get, you have to be able to give that to yourself before you can truly give it to anybody else. Let that sit in for just a minute, because I don't think a lot of us realize that in order to be able to get back what we really want, we have to be able to give that love, that appreciation, that respect to ourselves. And because we struggle with being able to do that, we people please. It's just the easiest way to feel like we're not screwing things up, right? By making sure that we give our time and our energy to other people and to other things, whether it be our parents or our spouses or our friends or our jobs. But you can't give from an empty cup. There's not anything to give when you're just giving and giving and giving and not giving to yourself. That's why you feel burnt out. That's why you feel frustrated. That's why you feel tired and overwhelmed. You have to take the time and the energy to invest in yourself so that you can actually give what it is that you intend to give to the world. Now, another sign that you may be a people pleaser is that you need other people to like you. Like, remember, this is tied back to that low self-esteem, that living authentically. You want people to like you, and you're constantly worrying about being rejected. And so in order to not feel abandoned, to not feel alone, to not feel like everyone in your life is just like walking out on you, you do whatever it takes to make those people happy so that you don't end up by yourself. And that can be really hard to sit with for a moment. So just let that sit, because it's okay if you're doing these things. It's okay if this is where you've been, but having the awareness that these are tendencies that align with how you're currently living gives you the power to be able to decide and to choose if you're going to continue to hold on to these characteristics, to have these traits be something that represent you, or if you want to make that change, if you actually want to choose yourself above everyone else. If you find it hard to say no to requests, then you're also people pleasing. If you're always saying yes to commitments and to requests and to meetings, even at work, right? You're putting everybody else's needs above your own. And I know that we do this a lot in our everyday lives, but think about it in the sense of a work factor as well, because a lot of us, we have jobs, right? And we have obligations and tasks that need to be cared for. And when we have meeting requests coming in and calls coming in and emails coming in, we can get really overwhelmed because everybody else's priorities keep being thrown at us. And we have to figure out whose priority is the most important one. It's the same thing in life, right? In your personal life, everybody's got the events that they want you to come to. They have requests that they want you to help take care of this, or can you check on this, or could you do this for me? And if you're constantly saying yes all of the time, you're losing that connection to yourself, because what you're doing again is you're putting everybody else and everything else above what you really need. Now, you can say yes to the things that light you up and make you feel good, but if you're saying yes to things and then 5 minutes later, an hour later, the next day, you're like, shit, I really wish I would have just said no. Like, I have other things that I want to do. I have other priorities. There's things that are important to me, but I just wanted to make my mom happy. I just wanted to make my husband happy. I just wanted to make my best friend happy. But when you're doing that, you're robbing yourself of your own happiness. And that's why it's so important to have the awareness on whether or not you have a hard time saying no. And it's not something that you're stuck with. It may feel like you won't be able to make this change, but you can, and you will, and we'll get there. Now, if you are constantly apologizing, even when there is nothing to apologize for, and even if you are not to blame, you are also people pleasing. Remember, in episode 9, we talked about suffering in silence and constantly apologizing and feeling this need to just apologize basically for our own existence. And that's not what we want to do. That's not how we want to live. And if you're doing that, you are falling into the people pleaser category. It's okay. We're going to make those changes. We're going to get you out of that, and we're going to get you back to choosing yourself and feeling good and feeling like your life is yours. So don't worry about it. A couple more things I just want to touch on as indicators of if you're a people pleaser. And I know that this list may feel a little extensive right now, but it's important to know if any of these hit home for you, because the first 5 that I've gone through, you might be like, no, that's not me. That's not me. That's not me. But ask yourself, do you have free time to yourself? Are you constantly taking on work? Are you constantly taking on responsibilities and different activities? And even if you don't have the time, like, are you just always saying yes? This ties to the last one. If you're always saying yes and taking on and taking on and taking on, you're people pleasing. You're people pleasing because you're overcommitting to plans, you're overcommitting to responsibilities, you're overcommitting to projects. Because you don't know how to choose yourself. You want to make everyone else happy because you believe that if everyone else is happy, then your world will be peaceful. But if you sit with that for a moment, how peaceful does that really feel to you? I bet you it doesn't feel peaceful at all. I mean, I know it doesn't feel peaceful at all because I've lived that life. And when you're overcommitting and you avoid advocating for what you actually need, and you don't say what you really need to say, like if someone asks you how you are and you just give that people-pleasing response, I'm fine, thanks, how about you? You're not really expressing yourself. You're not living authentically, and that's okay. But we want to make those changes because we want to rebuild that self-trust. We want to rebuild that self-worth so that you know that you deserve to be able to say what you need to say, to express what is important to you, to express what you need and what you want. Being able to do that is difficult, especially if we have been brought up in environments where we have just always wanted to make everybody else happy. And that happens a lot when we're growing up in our childhood. We want to make our parents happy. We want to make our guardians happy, whoever raised us, right? They have very high expectations of how we should behave, how we should act, how we should talk, how we should dress, what grades we get in school, when we get a job, the people that we hang out with. These are all ways that we are groomed and we are trained and we are programmed to put other people ahead of ourselves. And it's not that our guardians and our parents and our loved ones that raised us programmed us in this way intentionally so that we would be people pleasers and not choose ourselves. They just believed that that was the right thing for them to do because they thought that if they had these expectations for you, you would push yourself. But sometimes what we lose sight of while we're growing up and while our parents, our guardians are raising us is that the expectations that need to be set need to be the ones that we set for ourselves, not those that other people set for us. Because if we're always living and trying to meet the expectations of other people, then we're not living for ourselves, we're living for others, and we lose the fire, we lose that sense of purpose within ourselves. And we really lose that self-trust, we lose that self-worth because we base everything on what other people have to say, on what other people have to think. And that's a very easy way that we fall into people-pleasing tendencies and become a people pleaser. And a really big one, and one that's just going to wrap up, these tendencies of people pleasers and signs if you're a people pleaser, is one that always strikes home to me really, really deep. And that is that conflict is uncomfortable for you, that you want to avoid disagreeing with people and voicing your honest opinion. And you want to just go along with things and not, ruffle the tide, because if everything is going well, then why be that one that causes that friction? But see, the problem with that is that you are then again putting everybody else's needs ahead of your own. You're putting the comfort of the people that you're interacting with or that you're spending your time with or that you're talking to. You're putting their comfort above your own. And that's really confusing to your nervous system, because your nervous system is like, nope, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good. And then your mind is saying, just shut up, just shut up, just shut up. We just want to make this okay. We just want to make this okay. And then there's this internal struggle and battle that's going on within you. And then you're going to feel frustrated and you're going to feel overwhelmed. And then you're going to feel really tired because all of that energy is being spent on this internal battle instead of investing that energy in using your voice and speaking up when you need to speak up or setting a boundary when you need to set a boundary. So if you have a hard time with that, with setting boundaries, with speaking your truth or speaking up when you don't agree with an opinion because you just want to avoid the conflict, then you are a people pleaser. And it's okay, because most of us are, and most of us are trying to figure out, how do we break that cycle? How do we actually choose ourselves? Well, in order to be able to make those changes, you have to understand how it actually makes you feel, because the feelings and the emotions that we have within us drive so much of our behavior, drive so much of our life. And so if we're constantly feeling the way that most people pleasers feel, We're constantly struggling with feeling good. And you don't want to feel like shit. You want to feel good. That everybody wants to feel really fucking good all of the time. So if you feel this pressure to be friendly or to be nice or to be cheerful all the time, then you're people pleasing, because we aren't supposed to be vibrating at one level all the time. There's no growth there. There's no experience there. There's no change there. And so if you feel like you just always have to have your happy face on, if you always have to be having it all together, then I get it. I know how that feels. But I also know that you don't want to feel that way anymore. I also know from my own personal experience that if you are a people pleaser, then you feel really anxious about creating an uneasy situation or standing up for yourself. This was the same as like the tendencies that we were just going through, but you feel really anxious about that. It causes a lot of emotion and feeling within your body. And that's why you don't do it, because you just feel this compression, this almost like an elephant is sitting on your chest. And then all of the thoughts start to run in your mind as, well, if I actually expressed myself or actually stood up for myself, that it would cause all of these things. And we start creating these stories and these narratives within our mind, and then we talk ourselves out of doing the thing that we actually know that we really want to do. If you are constantly feeling stressed or feeling stressed out because of all of the commitments that you make and have taken on, and all of the yeses that you have said yes to when they actually need to be no's, that feels uncomfortable within your body. And that is because of the mistrust that you have built within yourself, because again, you are choosing the happiness of others over your own happiness. You may also feel frustrated because you always feel like you never have time for yourself, because yet again, you constantly say yes, you constantly are committing yourself to other things and doing other things that everybody else wants you to do, but you're not taking time to commit to yourself, to invest in yourself, and to be with yourself. And that's why these feelings just can get very, very overwhelming. You will just get so overwhelmed that you'll just be so frustrated because you just don't choose yourself. You don't have time for yourself. Your wants and your needs are they don't matter in comparison to other people. And we feel too, when we people please, that other people are going to take advantage of us, that they're going to manipulate us, that they're going to use us. And the reason that we feel that way is because that's what we're currently doing. We are currently manipulating other people and using other people. Whether you know that or not, when you are people pleasing and you're not authentically living your own life and expressing yourself and using your voice and speaking up for yourself and prioritizing yourself and putting yourself at the top of your list, then you're going to feel like you're being taken advantage of. But that's what you're doing to them, because you're just appeasing everything that they want. And how does that feel when somebody does that to you, when someone just continuously starts to say everything that they know that you want to hear? It's not genuine. It doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel real. But we still continue to do this because we feel like it is better than the alternative. But how do we know what the alternative actually feels like? How do we know what that can play out to be if we don't actually take the leap and try to do it? If we don't step outside of our comfort zone and make that change? That's how you build self-trust. That's how you build self-confidence, by doing things that are uncomfortable to you. Even if you fail, even if you trip up, even if it doesn't work out, the fact that you took the leap and you chose yourself above everyone and everything else, that's how you build self-confidence, and that's how you build self-trust. And that's an early release as to one of the ways that you actually break this cord of being a people pleaser. You do the scary things because that's how you build the self-confidence and the self-trust. And then it becomes easier and easier and easier. So we know what the signs and the traits are, right? Like we've gone over those and we've talked about how they make us feel, but why do we actually people please? And some of those reasons were in some of the things that we've already discussed, but a huge reason why is because of our past experiences and our past trauma and our conditioning. Because even if when we were a child, we knew, because remember, when we're children, we're much closer to who we really are and to tapping into that source power energy that fuels and drives all of us. But if we actually were doing that when we were younger and we were expressing ourselves and speaking up for ourselves and choosing ourselves, and we got in trouble for that, or we got reprimanded for that, or someone had an opinion and said something slick to us that has now created a narrative inside our head. This is trauma response in our adult life to continue to behave in a way that puts somebody else's needs and desires above your own, because you've been traumatized as a child. You were traumatized when you were younger to feel like, okay, so I did the thing that felt good to me, and this is what happened. Well, now I'm going to make a story and say, anytime I do the thing that feels good to me, this will happen. And you create those neural networks and pathways within your head. And then what happens is it becomes a belief. And then that's why you just continue as you grow up and you get older and you meet new people and you have new relationships to choose to put them above yourself. Because you also want to avoid the conflict. You don't want to be rejected. You fear being rejected. Our fears drive, they drive so much of our behaviors. And if we're unaware of the fears that we hold, then we're unaware of why we're living the life that we're living. That's why I believe so much in having awareness of ourselves and of the things that make us who we are. Not to beat up on those people, not to sit in the victim mentality mindset, not to stay in that part of our lives, but to have the awareness of it so that we know that we can make a different choice, and that we know that we are the ones that get to design how we get to feel and how we get to live. So knowing your fears is so important. We don't want to be rejected. We fear also disappointing other people. We don't want to let other people down. We know what it's like when we feel let down. And so again, we create stories and we create narratives within ourselves that say, if we want to avoid disappointing others or being rejected by others, then we need to do X, Y, Z, because that's what we've learned before. But you don't know what's possible until you try something that you've never tried before. We also people please because we want something in return. And I hesitate saying this because I know that this might strike a chord in you, and I want you to really be open and receptive to hearing this. But a lot of the times, many of us, we do things to get something back. We don't just give to give. We give because we want someone to be able to give back to us in that same way. And so when we're people pleasing and we put somebody else's needs above our own, and we do that for somebody else, we then expect them to do the same for us. And then when they don't, we get frustrated, we get annoyed, we get angry, we get hurt. When we are truly missing out that we're the ones that taught those people in our lives to do that behavior, to treat us in that way, because that's how we're treating them. So remember, what you give is what you get back. So if you want other people in your life to be authentic, to be real, to express what's really going on with them, then you have to be able to show up and do that yourself as well. And you want to avoid feeling like all you're doing is doing something in order to fit in. We people please because we want to fit in. And when we give out certain experiences and we respond in certain ways, right? We want to fit in certain situations. We want to be accepted. So if someone's gossiping about something, or someone's talking negative about the news or focusing on something, a lot of the times what we'll do is we'll self-sabotage ourselves, knowing that we don't want to have those conversations, that we don't want to go into that frequency. But we do that in order to keep the peace, in order to fit in, and in order to get back in return someone listening to us when we talk about something that's important to us, instead of realizing that what we really want is to be able to express what we want to express. And in order to do that, we have to break free from people pleasing. We also people please because we want people to be nice to us. We are constantly feeling like the world is out to get us, and we just want people to really understand us and to accept us and to be nice to us, because there's so many mean people and mean circumstances out there in the world. But what we have to realize is that in order for anyone to be nice to us, we have to be nice to ourselves first. And in order to be nice to ourselves, we have to choose ourselves. And we have to realize that all of the influences that we have had growing up are just that. They're just other people's influences in them trying to figure out what's important to them and how to live their life on their terms. So if you're someone who is easily influenced by other people, it's okay. That's how a lot of us have been living. But what is essential is to change that influence from the influence of being a people pleaser to being the influence of choosing yourself and standing up for yourself. So if you are someone who is easily influenced, then it's okay. You have probably been a people pleaser, but we're going to break those chains and we're going to break those cords. We also people please because we're genuinely compassionate people. We really care about other people. We care about how they feel. We care about how they're doing. We care about how their life is going. And a lot of the times what we want to do is we want to just continue to make them feel good. And so we choose them and we choose what they need over what we need. And it happens. It happens. But being a compassionate person does not mean that you always have to choose everybody else above yourself. Being a truly compassionate person means that you know how to choose yourself above everything else and to be that example to other people, to show them how to choose themselves and how to live their lives authentically and out loud. We also feel like we need to people please because we feel guilty for saying no. We have been taught that when we say no to other people and they get disappointed, that in order to avoid that disappointment, we need to just say yes. And then we end up getting frustrated with ourselves because we had said yes in a situation where we didn't want to say yes. So feeling guilty for saying no always drives us to people pleasing. It always does that. And what I'm getting to with all of the whys here is the real why beneath all of it. Beneath all of these surface level, you're influenced by others, you don't want to say no, you want to make other people happy. All of these other things comes from your lack of self-worth because you have your worth based on external validation. Remember, we were talking about low self-esteem? When we attach our worth to the approval of others, we're lacking that self-worth, and then we lack our own self-love because we don't feel loved, we don't feel worthy, we don't feel like we're enough, we don't feel like we're ever going to be enough, we don't feel like we're doing enough, all of these things. And so what we want to do is give, and then it leaves us burnt out. So that's the root. That's the real reason why we people please. Because we don't truly love and accept ourselves. We don't believe that we deserve better because we have been trained, remember what we said earlier, to base our worth and to base the deservingness of ourselves on the opinions and judgments of other people, that external validation. So if your parents or your guardians or your teachers or anyone had all of these expectations for you and you didn't meet them, right? Let's talk about grades. You want to come home with straight A's? You want to make your parents proud? And let's say you come home and you got that 1C. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to feel like you let everyone down. I've done it. I've literally ripped up papers that had grades on them that weren't A's and flushed them down the toilet because I was too embarrassed to bring them home to my parents because the expectation for me as a child was to exceed and excel well in school. And I created this belief in my head and in myself that if I didn't have straight A's, if I wasn't coming home with perfect grades, then I wasn't doing enough, that I wasn't enough. So maybe you resonate with that. Maybe there's another example that you have felt as a child when you reflect back, right? What is it that really set home for you when you were younger that made you feel like you just weren't enough? There's never just one thing. It's multiple things that compound that we're taught and that we're programmed to believe. But there's risks. There's risks of not having that self-worth within yourself and that self-trust and that self-love. There's risks of being a people pleaser. We've already touched on them. You're stressed, you're burnt out, you're tired, you feel neglected, you feel resentful. That's a strong one. You feel really resentful, especially if you start to do that reflection as to how you were brought up and how you were raised and the expectations that were set for you, then you're gonna feel really resentful when you have that awareness and you start reflecting back. You may just feel resentful as you're people pleasing because you can have these conversations with yourself inside your head like, I should have just said fucking no. And then you're going to get resentful towards yourself and towards others. You'll have issues with your relationships. They may not be satisfying to you anymore because you're not getting what you need out of the relationship. You're always giving and giving and giving into the relationship. So people pleasing doesn't always serve the relationships that you have, even if you think on the surface level it is, if it's making that person happy up front. Just because you're appeasing what somebody wants in that exact moment does not mean that that is what is necessary for that person or for your relationship with that person. Because relationships are here to teach us things. And sometimes relationships are able to grow and evolve as we continue to grow and evolve. But some relationships only come for certain seasons and for certain reasons and to teach us certain things. And so if we're constantly people pleasing and putting everybody else's needs above our own and putting the relationship above our own needs, then that relationship is going to suffer. And it's not going to feel like a good relationship to you anymore. You're going to start creating all these new stories as to why the relationship isn't working, when really, at the end of the day, the relationship isn't working because one or both of you are not choosing yourself and you're doing everything else to appease the other person, to meet their expectations instead of meeting your own expectations for the relationship. You also risk being taken advantage of. Because if people know that you're just always going to say yes and you're always going to do what they ask you to do or what they want you to do, they're going to continue to ask you to do those things. They're going to abuse that power because you've given it to them. You also risk losing your identity of yourself. You really do. You risk losing who you know you really are because you become what everybody else wants you to be. And when you become what everybody else wants you to be, it becomes a lot harder to figure out and to rediscover who it is that you actually are, because you're constantly putting everybody else above your own self. And the other huge one that we've already talked about, but we have to talk about this one more time, a huge risk of being a people pleaser is hurting other people. And that may seem like ass backwards, like that doesn't make any sense. If we're putting everybody else ahead of ourselves and we're putting our, their needs and their desires and everything else above our own, like how are we actually hurting people? Well, remember, sometimes we people please by trying to fit in. And so if you're hanging out with people that are talking about somebody else, you may, start tagging along in that conversation and gossiping about that person and sharing things about that person that maybe shouldn't really be shared. Maybe it was a personal conversation between the two of you, but now you've got that in with this group, and it feels good to feel loved and to feel accepted from other people because we're not getting that from ourselves. So we're going to do what we need to do to get more of that love, to get more of that attention. And so then we'll start talking shit about other people. And then what happens? It gets back to that person, and now you've hurt that person's feelings. And so then what are we going to do? We're probably going to apologize. And we're people pleasing again. It's this vicious, continuous circle of people pleasing. And we don't realize it in the moment. We only can realize it when we sit and we reflect and when we have the awareness and when we identify the areas of opportunity for us to be able to grow, for us to be able to change. And so I know you want to make the change. I know that if you've resonated with any of this, that you're like, fuck, I really need to stop. I really want to stop. Because I want to choose myself. I want to feel better. I don't want to have all these risks. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to live this way. So how do you actually stop being a people pleaser? How do you stop putting everything and everyone else above yourself and your own needs and your own desires? Well, you start small. You start really small. We get on to a micro base level and we figure out what it is that feels good for us next. So by starting small, we give ourselves time before we answer things. We give ourselves time before we make commitments to other people. We give ourselves time before we answer that call. We get into that conversation. Because if you think about something before you commit to it, before you respond to it, and you're not just immediately reacting, because there's so much pressure in this world to be on this go, 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 constant, yes, okay, moving, doing this, multitask, right? Getting all the things done. this go, go, go mentality, this masculine energy, it has to be balanced out with the feminine. You have to be able to slow down, because when we slow down is when we can reconnect with ourselves. When we slow down is when we can reflect on ourselves and our lives and our actions and our behaviors and our thoughts. So start small by slowing down, by not feeling the need to be answering, to be responding, to be committing. You've got to slow down in order to be able to hear the message that needs to come through to you. And we can't dissect our feelings and our emotions and what's going on inside our body. We can't analyze our thoughts if we're rushing through everything. We can't hear what it is that our soul and our higher self is really trying to tell us if we're constantly on the go. So in order to hear what you need to hear, you've got to slow down. And instead of giving an answer that you know is what the other person wants you to hear, what do you want? What do you want out of this? What is necessary for you in order to feel good about this moving forward? And if that is saying yes and making the commitment, then follow through with that. But don't just say yes and don't just make the commitment and don't just give yourself up and give all of your energy up just because it makes somebody else happy. Because at the end of the day, nobody else's happiness is your responsibility. You are the only one that is responsible for you. Your happiness is your only responsibility. That's it. It's not anybody else's responsibility to make you happy, and it is not your responsibility to make anybody else happy. Another way to really start small and to build on as you continue to get more self-worth and to rebuild your self-trust and to rebuild that confidence that you have within yourself is with your boundaries. Boundaries can be boundaries with time or boundaries with your words or boundaries with energy. There's so many ways that we can set boundaries. It doesn't just have to be like cutting somebody out of your life, burning that bridge and saying, all right, peace out, we're done here. No, set boundaries for yourself, not for other people. That's how you build self-confidence and self-trust and re-find your self-worth, is you set boundaries and you say, I'm setting a boundary and I am spending the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes of the day with myself. I don't care about my kids. I don't care about my spouse. I don't care about my parents. I don't care about my job. I care about myself. In those 30 minutes, I care about myself. And you make it work and you figure out a way to take your time back, to take that back for yourself, because that's how you take your power back. So set boundaries with your time, set boundaries with your words. Remember, stop with the immediate yes, 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 yes. Learn how to make no a complete sentence. Know how to use words that help you express yourself, that help you fully be able to vocalize what it is that you feel and what it is that you want and what it is that you desire. And if people are saying things that aren't in alignment with what you want and what you desire, then set the boundaries and say, no, this does not feel good to me, and I just will not accept this. And that helps you as well set boundaries with your energy. Because if you can say, no, this is not okay with me. No, I will not accept this. No, this does not feel good to me. You're really taking that power back for yourself. You're really giving yourself the opportunity to be able to stand up for yourself because you've set the boundaries. And boundaries can be very hard to uphold all the time, especially with really important people in our lives. And there may be many a times that you may slip up and be like, oh, I should have said no and I didn't say no. Or I should have said yes and I didn't say yes. But it's a learning experience. And remember, we're starting small and we're giving ourselves time and we're slowing down and we're setting boundaries. It's not a flip of the switch. None of this happens overnight. You did not become a people pleaser overnight. These tendencies didn't just become your habits overnight. It took time and effort and consistent dedication to coming back to things. You may not have realized that when you were becoming a people pleaser, but every time that an instance happened, you rewired and hardened that neural network, that neural pathway. And that trained you that this is the way I need to live. This is the way that I need to operate. So think about for a second, if somebody outside of yourself had the power and had the ability to control how you acted based on their expectations and you following those expectations, why are you discrediting yourself from being able to do that for yourself? There's no one that has more power or more influence over you than you. Nobody. You are the one that is in the driver's seat of your life. You cannot control every single thing that happens in life, but you can control how you show up, how you invest your time, how you invest your energy, what you say. So that is why it's so important to prioritize yourself above all other things, because you are the one that dictates how your life goes. Nobody else can make you do anything. A beautiful way to be able to look at this is like, think about how hard it is to change somebody else. Even if it's with the best of intentions, even if, let's say, you have someone that maybe is drinking too much alcohol, or maybe is eating a way that they shouldn't be eating, or isn't doing as much physical activity as you know that they should be doing. How hard is it to get somebody else to make a change? It feels fucking impossible sometimes. It feels so hard to be able to change things in other people. So instead of trying to do that and to trying to make everybody fit into your world, fit into your own world first. Choose yourself first. Focus on making changes for yourself first. Because when you take all of that time and that energy and all of those resources and you stop spending it on everybody and everything else and you take it back for yourself, that's when you can break being a people pleaser. That's when you can get your power back, and that's when you can feel reinvigorated with yourself. But it takes one small step at a time. It takes time. It takes boundaries. It takes courage and confidence. And remember, the ways to have more courage and the ways to have more confidence is to do the things that scare you. And choosing yourself can be really fucking scary, because we don't want to end up alone. We don't want to end up all alone in our own little bubble with no one there to help and to support us. But I can guarantee that you already feel that way because you're people pleasing and putting everybody and everything else above your own needs. You've self-sabotaged to a point where you have no more self-trust. And that's why it feels so hard to make that change. So give yourself space, give yourself grace. And more important than anything else, get support. Get support to help you move through these things, because your old people-pleasing tendencies are going to come back. They're going to try to trip you up every now and then. And that's not always a negative thing. Sometimes we've got more messages to figure out. We've got more work to do. We've got more healing to do. And it's been such a long pattern and such a long life of people-pleasing that it's going to feel really hard to get back into the groove when you do have that slip up. So having the support and having the love to get you through and to remind you that you are capable, that you can do this when we're in our own heads and we're being our own worst enemies, that's a really powerful way to be able to stop being a people pleaser. Find other people pleasers that are breaking the cords of being people pleasers and get into a community with them. Be the rocks for each other, to support each other. Encourage each other to say no, to set boundaries, to choose themselves. Because when you have people that are doing the same things that you're doing, it makes it so much easier to be able to do them. Even if you're all struggling with the same things, you're in that struggle boat together. And it's so much easier to get a boat across the sea when there's more than one person in it. It takes a team, it takes a tribe. It's a huge part of what living free being me is giving you that safe space to be able to embody and to express and to embrace all of who you are and to choose yourself above everything else. So what's the moral of the story here? We've been talking about a lot of the same things. We're all trying to drive these things home, but we want to stop being people pleasers. We want to stop being people who don't believe in themselves. So many, if not all of us, are people pleasers. In one capacity or another, we have things that we do to please other people, to put other people above our own needs and our own desires. But we don't have to stay in this box. We can change. You can change, and you will change. But there's steps, right? And the steps, I always bring back to the pillars of living free, being me, because that is where the magic is. The magic is in having the self-awareness that you are a people pleaser. It's always the first step. Simply being able to recognize that you've been living this lifestyle and that this has been your life is huge. And then the second step of that is accepting that you have been a people pleaser. Being able to accept that that's how you were raised and that's what you've learned. You don't beat yourself up, but knowing where you're at and accepting where you're at are two totally different things. So when you accept where you are, right, we have the awareness, so we know where we are. But when you accept where you are, then you can move forward. If we try to push it away and to ignore it, then we can't change. We may be aware that we have this habit or habits that aren't serving us, that aren't bringing us closer to the life and to the way that we actually want to live, then we feel that stuckness. But when you accept that this is where you were and that you can make that change. Got a little bug. Oh, okay, that's why I have to keep it real. I had a little gnat, just this light, I think, is bringing it here. But having the awareness and having the acceptance are two totally different things. So when you are aware, that's great. Step 1. Step 2, accepting. Step 3, having unconditional love for yourself. Even if you're a people pleaser, you have to love yourself. You have to know that you didn't intentionally choose to put everybody and everything else above yourself. That's something that was taught to you. And that's something that you're now learning how to break free from. And it becomes so much easier when we want to move forward, when we love ourselves unconditionally. And loving ourselves unconditionally doesn't just mean right here, right now. It means also loving who you've been and where you've been and what you've experienced and what got you to where you are today. That's what true unconditional self-love is. It's not beating yourself up. It's not playing the victim and blaming everybody else. It's loving yourself and knowing that you have been doing the best that you could with the information that you have. But now you have more information. Now you know all of the reasons and ways and risks and feelings of being a people pleaser. So now you get to make the choice. You can't make an educated choice if you do not have an abundance of information to base this off of. And if all you've been basing your life and your beliefs off of is what you've always known, then it's no wonder that you're still people pleasing. But now that you've gone through this episode and now that you're in this world of learning more about yourself and doing self-rediscovery and self-development, now you can start to really move forward. So if we have the self-awareness and we have the self-acceptance and we have the unconditional self-love of where we've been and why we're a people pleaser, now it's time as step 4 to take radical responsibility for yourself, to not play that blame game. And if you did for a little bit, be like, okay, yeah, it was my parents' fault, but it was is past tense, is right now. I am the one that's responsible for myself and I am the one that gets to make the choice. Own where you are. Own where you've been and take action to become better. That's how you start to break free from being a people pleaser. It's not blaming everybody else for why you became this way. You have the awareness of it, you accept it, and you love it because you would not be the person that you are today if you did not go through those experiences. But now you're going to take that responsibility and you're going to do something about it. Even if it's a small step, even if it's just having more boundaries with your time, you're going to take that next step because you have step 5, real self-respect. You are breaking the pattern of being a people pleaser. And that takes time and that takes effort. But because you have so much respect for yourself and knowing that you are doing your best and you are actually taking an action forward to make a change, you will make that change. You will make that change because you're aware and you're accepting and you're loving and you're responsible and you're respectful of yourself, not everyone else, of yourself, because you didn't become one overnight. Like we said, right? It's going to take time and it's going to take effort to change your thoughts, to change your beliefs, and to change your habits. But it all starts with the thoughts. So if we have the awareness of why we've become a people pleaser and how we've become a people pleaser, then we get to do the work on changing the way we think about people pleasing, about changing the way we think about ourselves, about our self-worth, about our self-confidence, about our self-trust, about how we're supposed to show up in the world and in relationships with other people. When you have self-respect and you hold yourself accountable for yourself, aka self-responsibility, you are able to then begin choosing yourself more and more and more and more. And when you choose you, you're not people-pleasing anyone but yourself. So if there's anything to take from this, is that if you really, really, really feel like you cannot change being a people pleaser, at least change the fact that the only person that you are here to please is yourself. So change the way you people please. Stop people pleasing for everyone else and start people pleasing for yourself. Start choosing yourself. Start putting yourself on the top of that priority list. Easy ways to be able to actually do this, I have built into my free 7-day self-love reboot. It's 7 days of 7 activities that help you fall back in love with yourself, help you fall back in love with your life, help you feel better than you've been feeling. They're simple activities and they help to really get reconnected with yourself. So if you're looking for a way to be able to start breaking the chain and to start breaking the cord, and maybe boundaries just feel really hard right now, start with the 7-day self-love reboot. It's completely free. All you got to do, click the link and provide your email address, and those emails will start kicking off for you. And I can guarantee that they make a difference. They've not only made a difference in my own personal life, but in my clients' lives. I continue to get messages from people who are signing up for the reboot and who love these activities. They're making a difference in the way that people feel. They are making a difference in the way that people show up and in the way that people live their lives. So why not you? Why not? There's nothing, this costs nothing. All it does is takes some of your time. But instead of investing your time in people pleasing, invest your time in falling back in love with yourself. Because you can do it. And I know you want to. I know you want to. I know you want to. And choosing me, I said it many times throughout this podcast, but choosing me isn't just an idea. It's a 6-week mastermind that I have put together. And we are kicking that off right before we jump into June. And I'm really excited to be able to dive even deeper into the pillars of living free, being me. You've been noticing as we've been continuing to have these conversations, how they tie into every single aspect of our life. They tie into suffering on our own. They tie into people pleasing. They tie into our lives and our dreams and our purpose. So if you're ready to dive even deeper into true self-acceptance and true self-awareness and true self-unconditional love and true radical responsibility and true self-respect, choosing me is where you want to get yourself into, because it is really going to give you the tools and give you the keys to how you can actually choose yourself and stop people pleasing and be the person that you really want to be. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. It really hits home for me just because I'm still doing my daily work. I'm still taking my small steps every single day on breaking cords of people pleasing, but it has made such a huge change in my life by following what we've talked about here and by doing the different activities that I have in my other programs and in my other courses. And so if this has resonated with you at all, please leave a review, get in touch with me, let me know how this sat with you. Share it with somebody who may be a people pleaser and really needs to hear this message too, and to know that they're not alone, and to know that, we know the struggles of what it's like to put everyone else above yourself, but that the most important thing to do is to people please for yourself and to choose yourself over everything and everyone else. Because at the end of the day, There is nothing that is more important than the way that you feel. I am sending you my love. I'm sending you my love. And we will be back next week with a brand new episode. I'll talk to you then.